Rhett Sloane stands on the front lawn, gasping like he just ran out of air, because he did. Through the window, he sees a white crib. The porch light is on, and the man opening the door isn't him. Maris steps forward, pregnant, calm, and says the words that erase his entire life. "I signed the papers. This house isn't yours anymore." An hour ago, he was in Seattle's King Street station, driving her father's 2012 Subaru Outback home. Now he's a stranger with nowhere to go. So what happens when he refuses to disappear and someone decides he must? Like, subscribe and tell me, where are you watching from? Rhett Sloane stepped off the Amtrak Cascades line at King Street Station with a stiffness that went deeper than the cold. It wasn't just the November air that tightened his back. It was muscle memory, combat wiring that hadn't fully deactivated. The red brick station was busy, with banners still hanging from the Veterans Day parade 2 nights before. But he didn't meet a single eye. That suited him. The only thing that grounded him in that moment was the heavy weight of the Subaru's key in his coat pocket, and the smell of black roast coffee wafting from the Starbucks inside the station's atrium. He grabbed a venti dark roast, no sugar, just heat and bitterness, and walked out into the streets of Seattle. At Pike Place Market, Christmas lights were already going up along the canopy, tourists snapping photos near the bronze pig. Rhett didn't stop. He didn't linger. He took comfort in motion. The car, a 2012 Outback that still had the Tacoma Mall parking sticker on the back windshield, was waiting in a nearby garage. He started the engine, gripped the wheel tight, and merged onto I-5 South with one thing pulsing behind his ribs. He was going home. Maris was waiting. Maybe she'd be angry. Maybe scared, but she'd open the door. The drive from Seattle to Tacoma took just under an hour with light traffic, and every mile felt like a fuse burning shorter. The rain kept up, a thin, persistent drizzle that blurred the sides of the freeway and made the green exit signs for South 38th Street and Pearl Street glow like old memories. Rhett played nothing on the stereo. No music, no news, just the tires on wet asphalt and his own thoughts looping images from deployments he'd rather forget, then jumping to Maris. Her last video message was nearly 6 months old. She hadn't looked at the camera much, but she wore the necklace he gave her when he re-upped in 2017. That had to mean something. As the Tacoma Narrows Bridge approached, the fog over the water was thick, and Rhett rolled down the window slightly just to feel the sting of the cold air on his face. It kept him present, grounded, the way you learn to do when your brain wants to slip sideways. By the time he turned onto North 21st Street, his hands were shaking, not from nerves, not entirely, but from something older, deeper, like his body knew what was waiting before he did. The house stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, white siding, trimmed hedges, porch light on, familiar, too familiar. He parked behind a new black Audi Q5. It was the first thing that told him something was off. Maris didn't like German cars. She used to say they were too quiet, too impersonal. The driveway was clean, almost staged. Through the window, Rhett saw movement, then color. A warm yellow glow in the living room, and there, in the center of that light, a white crib. His breath snagged. The crib hadn't been there before. It was the kind with gray mesh siding and a mobile hanging overhead, spinning slowly. He got out of the Subaru and approached the door like a man who suddenly didn't know how to knock. Before he could raise a fist, the door opened. The man who stood there had the look of someone who knew exactly where the silverware was kept. Pressed shirt, sleeves rolled, eyes calm. "Can I help you?" He asked, like Rhett was a delivery guy who'd taken too long. Before Rhett could speak, Maris appeared behind him. Her blonde hair was shorter than he remembered. She rested a hand on her belly, visible now, undeniable. "Rhett," she said. One word, no apology, no welcome. Just his name like a warning, and then, "I signed the house over last month. It's not yours anymore." The words didn't land all at once. Rhett blinked, like he'd walked into a wall made of syllables. Signed the house. Not his anymore? He looked past the man, past the hallway lined with family photos. Some new, some altered. The one of them, in Leavenworth from 3 winters ago, was gone. In its place, a canvas print of a lake scene, generic and impersonal. "I came back," he said finally, the words fragile, like he was checking if his own voice still worked. Maris didn't flinch. "You were gone too long," she said. Her hand dropped to her side. She didn't cry. She didn't explain. The other man placed a hand on the door, subtly shifting his body into the space. "It's not a good time," he said. Rhett exhaled like he'd been holding it for years. His legs took a step back on their own. "You could have told me," he said. Maris looked down at the floor. "I tried." She didn't say when. She didn't say how. Maybe it was in one of the voicemails he couldn't bring himself to check overseas. Maybe she sent a letter. Or maybe she didn't. Either way, it was too late now. And Rhett felt something ancient unraveling in his chest, like a thread being yanked from the inside. He didn't remember turning around. One moment he was on the porch, the next he was in the yard, air spinning too fast, vision tunneling. His chest seized up. He dropped to one knee like a puppet with its strings cut, fingers clawing at the zipper of his jacket. He wasn't crying. Not yet. He didn't have that luxury. What took over was sharper, panic, cold and chemical, the kind that starts in the gut and flashes up behind the eyes. He gasped hard, then harder, until the world started dimming around the edges. From inside, the door closed. Not slammed, just quietly shut. He stared at the Subaru, at the reflection of his own face in the window, wild-eyed, unshaven, no longer the man who left for his 3rd deployment in 2020. A neighbor across the street, an older woman watering dead plants, watched him for a beat too long, then went inside. Minutes passed before he could stand again. He stumbled back to the car and sat in the driver's seat, fingers twitching. He grabbed his phone and hovered over her name in his contacts, thumb trembling. He didn't press it, didn't know what he'd say. So he turned off the screen and sat there, engine off, phone in hand, a soldier with nowhere left to report. That night, Tacoma police logged an informal domestic concern based on a neighbor's call about a man in distress, possibly unstable outside a residence. No charges, no arrest. But enough for a note, enough to show up in background checks. Enough to end the part-time VA tech job he was supposed to start that Monday at the American Lake VA Medical Center. By morning, Rhett's inbox was empty, and the voicemail he left for the HR contact had no response. The Subaru became home by default. He parked near Titlow Park, near the water, where joggers wouldn't look too long, and no one asked questions. He kept the engine off to save gas, but turned on the ignition now and then to hear something mechanical, something alive. In his lap, the phone stayed open, Maris's contact still on the screen. The last message from her was dated July. 4 months and a lifetime ago. His stomach growled, but he didn't move. He had $43.25 left on his debit card, and he couldn't decide if it should go to gas or food. In the end, he chose neither. He leaned back, eyes wide open in the dark, waiting for what he couldn't say. But the night gave no answers. By the 3rd day, the Subaru had started to smell like damp clothing and takeout wrappers Rhett couldn't afford. He rotated between the Safeway parking lot on Pearl Street and the pull-through lanes behind a Union 76 gas station near South Orchard, always careful not to overstay in one place. Tacoma wasn't big, and the same patrol cars kept passing by. He shaved in the restroom at the Tacoma Dome Transit Center using a pocket Bic razor and splashy hand soap, standing under fluorescent lights that made him look 10 years older. At a Denny's on Hosmer Street, he pretended to scroll job boards on a cracked Moto G7, just to stay seated with a bottomless coffee for $3.89. From a booth over, A father fed his toddler bits of pancake, and Rhett caught himself watching too long. Not in envy, exactly. Just with that ache you feel when you remember how things were supposed to go. The radio in the restaurant played a KNKX weather update. Incoming snow over Snoqualmie Pass. 8 to 12 inches expected, travel discouraged. The words lodged somewhere under his ribs. He stood up before finishing the refill. Without really planning it, he turned east. Gas was low, food was lower, and something inside him decided that staying meant disintegrating piece by piece. Leaving, at least, had a direction. The Subaru's heater coughed weakly, but still fought the cold, as Rhett pushed past Puyallup and headed toward Yakima, hoping to find some back road that wouldn't look too official. The farther he got, the more his phone lost signal. Somewhere past Ellensburg, the sky turned harder, more decisive. He stopped briefly at a Chevron to buy a pre-packaged turkey sandwich and a gallon of water with the last $14 on his debit card. He tossed the wrapper into the back seat, now more like a closet than part of the car. When he turned onto Highway 12, heading toward Lolo Pass, the Subaru started making a new sound. A wet click under the hood every time he braked. He ignored it. There was nothing he could do with no tools and no money. His thumbs itched. He still hadn't called Maris, but the number stared at him from the recents. He finally deleted it, not out of rage, just self-defense. Around White Pass, snow began to fall. First light, then heavier. He passed a road sign warning of chains required ahead, but he didn't have any. He just pressed forward. The miles felt less like travel and more like shedding skin. Every landmark he passed, Glenoma, Randall, Packwood, felt like a former version of himself falling off. And yet he couldn't say what he was heading toward, just that he couldn't stay behind. By the time he reached Lolo Pass, his knuckles were stiff on the wheel and the Subaru was barely holding on. The engine lights had come on 3 exits ago, but he pretended not to see them. Snow now covered the road in clumps, heavy enough to force him under 20 mm/pow. He passed no other cars. The wipers dragged reluctantly across the glass, and each rotation felt slower. And then, just before a hairpin bend, the Outback groaned, sputtered, and died. No dramatic smoke, no final bang, just silence. Rhett tried the ignition twice. Nothing. The battery was gone. He sat for a moment, hands clenched, listening to his breath fog the inside of the windshield. No cell signal, no passing headlights. He threw on the faded olive military parka he kept in the back, zipped it up to the throat, and stepped out. The snow hit him with a slap. It wasn't romantic. It was survival-grade cold, the kind that gets into your joints. He grabbed the gallon jug and his duffel bag from the back, slung them over his shoulders, and started walking. No destination, just forward. Each step was deliberate. There was no panic, not yet, just shame. Deep, soul-staining shame, because he didn't have a single person in the world who knew where he was. No one would notice if he froze on the side of the road tonight. He didn't know how long he walked, maybe 40 minutes, maybe more, before the trees opened slightly, and he saw it. A cabin not far from the bend, just off the tree line. It didn't look lived in. No lights, no smoke, no car. Just a rectangle of wood and shadow. He approached cautiously, stepping across what looked like a forgotten path. The porch creaked under his boots, but the front door wasn't locked. It gave way with the kind of resistance that meant it hadn't been opened in a while, but not so much that it felt truly abandoned. Inside, the smell hit him. Dust, mildew, and the metallic tang of forgotten objects. He shut the door behind him, not bothering with manners. His fingers were red and clumsy as he dug in his coat for the emergency matches he kept in a film canister. He found a wood stove in the corner, and after several shaky attempts, got a flame going. The warmth didn't reach far, but it reached him. He sank down onto the floor in front of it, pulling the parka tighter around his shoulders. Only then did his breathing return to something close to normal. He was alive. For now, that would have to be enough. It wasn't until his third matchstick and second coughing fit that Rhett noticed the basement door, partially obscured by a stack of plastic crates, some labeled with peeling USPS priority mail stickers from as far back as 2012. Something about the door felt off. It had a chain across it, but only loosely hung, not secured, as if whoever placed it wanted the illusion of restriction, not the function. He stood up, curiosity slowly waking under the exhaustion. The floor near the door had scuff marks, newer than everything else. He squatted, touched the dirt, felt how dry it was. Someone had been here, not years ago, weeks, maybe days. A part of him wanted to leave it all alone, crawl under a blanket of silence, and never open anything again. But another part, the one that had walked through bunkers in Kandahar, knew what hidden meant. Hidden wasn't always safe. Sometimes hidden meant dangerous or valuable. He pressed on the wooden panel nearest the baseboard and heard it. Hollow, sharp, unmistakable. His pulse quickened, not out of fear but awareness. Someone had built something behind that wall. He took a breath, wiped his palms on his jeans, and whispered to himself, this wasn't just left behind. It felt like a secret, one he was now part of, whether he wanted to be or not. And yet, Rhett didn't open it, not that night. He returned to the stove, fed it what little dry wood he found under the sink, and lay on the floor with his duffel bag as a pillow. His thoughts didn't quiet, but they flattened into exhaustion. The scuffed wall, the fake chain, the chill in the boards beneath him, it all hovered like a hum under the skin, but he didn't move. He couldn't. The last thing he remembered before sleep took him was the way the flame flickered across the room and caught the edge of something, maybe metal, maybe glass, just past the false wall. The idea that someone had used this place recently gnawed at him, but not enough to stop him from closing his eyes. Not yet. He pulled the parka up to his chin and let his body go slack, just enough to pretend for a few hours that he wasn't running, wasn't broke, wasn't freezing, just enough to survive until morning. The panel gave with less effort than Rhett expected. One shove with his shoulder, and it snapped back, revealing a narrow crawl space packed with dust and the strange smell of cold metal. His flashlight, just the cracked LED from his phone, barely cut through the dark, but the shapes came into view. A military ammo crate, green and rusted at the hinges, a canvas duffel bag like the kind issued at Fort Benning, and behind them 2 stacked wooden boxes, hand-built, sealed with old padlocks now hanging open. Rhett crouched, breath shallow. Inside, the boxes were gold bars, at least a dozen. Smooth, unmarked, no serials. They looked freshly cleaned, though the edges were worn, handled many times. The duffel bag held 24 rounds of 7.62mm NATO cartridges and a Beretta M9 with a missing safety. He unzipped a plastic envelope wedged between the boxes and froze. Inside were photographs, black and white, most curled at the corners, along with folded documents stamped with red wax seals and a list of handwritten names in cursive, paired with dates and coded annotations, not military standard. Not personal letters, something in between, catalogued human lives, and none of this was meant to be found. He sat back against the wall, holding a bar of gold in both hands, the weight nearly numbing. Not because it was heavy, but because it meant escape. He thought about what it could buy. A new identity, a used Chevy Silverado, motel rooms for months, even that minor shoulder surgery the VA kept pushing 6 months out. Hell, it could buy Alaska if he wanted to vanish that far north. No more parking lots, no more bathrooms with sticky soap dispensers, no more memories clawing through his sleep. The gold whispered solutions, each more seductive than the last. And yet, the photos pressed against his thigh like a moral weight. One showed a child standing beside a tank, face blurred, hand clutching a stuffed monkey. Another had a woman looking directly into the lens, mouth mid-sentence, expression half fear, half command. These weren't random artifacts. Someone had chosen them, kept them, paired them with those names and dates for a reason. He couldn't pretend they weren't real. Rhett closed his eyes and leaned his head against the cold wall. "You've earned it," a voice inside hissed. But another voice, quieter and older, the one that made him relace his boots every morning in Helmand when everyone else stopped trying, whispered back, "Not like this." He let out a breath, slow, controlled, and started planning not how to use it, but how to report it. Before dawn, Rhett loaded only what he could hide, the Beretta buried under the passenger seat, the documents sealed in a vacuum-packed grocery bag he found in a broken drawer. One bar of gold, just one, slid into a coffee can wrapped in an old towel wedged between the spare tire and rear lining of the Subaru. Not to keep. Insurance. He didn't trust the world enough to go in empty-handed. As soon as the first grey light cracked over the tree line, he turned the ignition. The engine sputtered like a smoker on a cold jog, but caught. Lolo Pass stretched silent ahead. He drove slow, eyes darting between the rear view and the side mirrors, every flicker of shadow behind him setting his nerves on edge. It was almost 8 a.m. When he caught cell service again near Kamaya, Idaho, the first thing he did was try to call the anonymous tip line listed on the Department of Justice website. No answer. Then the FBI's Spokane field office. He got voicemail. He didn't leave a message. He didn't trust recorded systems. Not for this. He pulled over at a gas station that sold cheap coffee and lottery tickets, sat behind the wheel with the burner phone he kept taped under the seat, an old LG Stylo 4, prepaid from Walmart in Yakima, and texted an old contact from his second tour. Just 3 words. "I need guidance." The reply came faster than he expected. "Don't use phones. Stay moving." No signature. Rhett didn't need one. It was from Rawls, an Army signals guy turned civilian contractor who owed him a favor from Kandahar. If Rawls was spooked, that meant the reach behind this stash was deeper than just black market leftovers. As he rejoined the road, a pickup truck fell in behind him about a quarter-mile back. It wasn't close enough to seem threatening, but it didn't turn off either. A grey Ford F-150, no plates on the front, tailgate rusted. Rhett slowed slightly. The truck matched. He turned right onto Route 64, a longer way toward Grungeville, and it followed. Not aggressively, just present. He turned the music off completely, listened to every tire crackle, every engine rhythm. When his phone buzzed, it startled him more than the wind had back at the cabin. It was a message from Maris's number. Just 6 words. "You shouldn't have come back." His blood chilled, not because of the words, but because she never texted, ever, and she wouldn't have known where he was. Not unless someone was watching, not unless someone had been listening to more than his voicemails. He gripped the wheel tighter, fingers pale against the faux leather wrap, heart pulsing in his ears. "It's not her," he muttered to himself, voice low and nearly breaking. The truck dropped back, almost as if it had made its point. He took the next left and found himself on a dirt shoulder, surrounded by empty land, and nothing to shield him but tall pines and bad decisions. He sat there for a minute, then got out and checked under the car. Nothing obvious. But that didn't mean nothing was there. He popped the hood, pretending to inspect the battery, bought himself a few seconds to breathe. In the rear view, he saw the F-150 finally pass, slow, the driver hidden behind reflective sunglasses. No wave, no glance, just a deliberate continuation. Rhett didn't move until the truck was completely gone. Then he got back in, turned off the phone completely, pulled the SIM, and snapped it in half. There would be no more calls, no more chances for whoever was watching to listen. Whatever Maris had become part of, it wasn't coincidence. And the man in the doorway hadn't been a rebound. He was part of this. Rhett felt it now like a bad tooth, buried, aching, and undeniably real. As he pulled back onto the road, adrenaline still poisoning his bloodstream, he knew two things. First, the gold wasn't just stolen, it was protected. Hidden for a reason, buried by someone powerful enough to make Maris's number dance on command. Second, if he chose the wrong person to trust next, he wouldn't just lose the truth, he'd be erased. A man without a house, a name, or a country, just another forgotten file. He adjusted the mirror, met his own eyes for half a second, and said aloud, "You don't get to vanish. Not this time." He didn't believe it yet, but saying it out loud mattered. Saying it gave it weight, and in a world where nothing felt solid anymore, words spoken in solitude were the only compass he had left. The road opened ahead, narrow and winding, and Rhett drove toward the next patch of signal, not to call anyone, but to decide who he had to become to survive what was clearly already hunting him. Rhett reached the edge of Lewiston just before noon, the sun doing little to thaw the stiffness in his joints. He hadn't slept, not really. At a Sinclair gas station off 21st Street, he stumbled inside, cradling a $5 bill for coffee and Band-Aids. The cashier, a woman maybe 20 years younger, stared briefly at his cracked knuckles, but didn't ask. People in towns like this knew how to mind their own. He bought a burner SIM card and slid it into his backup Stylo 4, hoping for signal. A single bar blinked to life. He opened the camera app and scanned the names from the envelope one by one, searching for someone, anyone, that didn't feel like a dead end. That's when he saw it. Kathleen Moreau, contact sister. There was a note beside her name. Last seen Boise, VA, 2013. Something about it pierced deeper than the others. She wasn't just a name. She was tethered to someone who mattered enough to be listed. He didn't call right away. He waited an hour, sitting in his idling car behind the station, weighing if he was about to ruin a stranger's life by showing up. But something told him this one was different. Not safer, but human, and he needed that more than safety. He made the drive in silence, stopping once in Orofino for gas, and again in Riggins to rest his eyes, though he never fully shut them. Boise stretched out beneath a cloudless sky when he finally arrived. His GPS led him to a duplex off Americana Boulevard, across from Ann Morrison Park, the kind of neighborhood where kids left scooters in driveways and front yards had Black Lives Matter signs, sun-faded in the windows. Rhett sat for 20 minutes across the street before working up the courage to approach. When the door opened, she looked nothing like he expected. Kathleen Moreau was barely in her 40s, tall, with hair clipped short and hands dusted with clay. She'd clearly been sculpting something when he rang. Her eyes didn't widen in alarm. They narrowed, curious. He introduced himself carefully, cautiously. "I was overseas with your brother," he lied. She didn't blink. "Which one?" That threw him. He swallowed. "Jules, Afghanistan, 2011. Her posture shifted, just slightly, and then she nodded once and stepped aside. "You look like hell," she said plainly. He laughed, actually laughed, and followed her inside. The apartment was cluttered but warm, filled with handmade pottery and books stacked horizontally instead of vertically. A kettle whistled on the stove, and she made him ginger tea without asking. Rhett sat at a small kitchen table while she moved around the space with the economy of someone used to surviving alone. When he finally pulled out the envelope, now wrapped in 2 layers of gas station plastic, he didn't hand it over. He set it on the table, then rested his palm over it like it might float away. "There's a list in here, names, some match to photos, dates, your brother's in it." She looked at him, not at the envelope. "Dead or missing?" she asked. "Not sure," Rhett admitted. "But the way he's listed, he was involved, deeply." Kathleen didn't reach for the envelope. She pulled out a kitchen chair and sat. "You're not the first to come asking about Jules," she said, "but you're the first to show up with shaking hands." Her voice wasn't unkind, just observant. "Do you want to tell me what this really is?" Rhett hesitated, then nodded, and for the first time since returning, he told someone everything. Maris, the cabin, the gold, the photos, the chase, the message. He told it like confession. She listened like a witness. After an hour, she finally opened the envelope. Her fingers moved slower than he expected, deliberate. She took in each document without flinching. "Half of this is coded language from Project Grey Ledger," she said. "It was scrubbed after '08. My brother used to send scraps like this before he vanished. I thought he was paranoid. Maybe he was." She traced a name on one of the pages. "If you give this to the wrong person, you won't live long enough to regret it." Rhett didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence said he already knew. She got up, made another cup of tea, and handed it to him without meeting his eyes. "Let me make some calls," she said. "I still know people who aren't owned yet." That "yet" landed like a blade. He stayed the night on her couch. The next morning she handed him a flash drive with the digitized contents, a burner number to use, and the contact of a journalist in Spokane who'd been chasing pieces of this for years. Before he left, she pressed a folded slip of paper into his hand. "Just in case this goes wrong," she said. "I believe you." That was all, and that was everything. He returned to the cabin 2 days later, not as a fugitive, not quite a free man, but no longer someone waiting to be erased. The stove was cold, but waiting. He repaired the door with scavenged hinges from an abandoned hunting shack up the road and cleaned out the basement, finally throwing out the empty duffel bag and restacking the ammo crate as a seat. There was a quiet dignity to the work, measured, necessary. No one would come looking here again. The danger wasn't gone, but it had shifted. They couldn't erase what was already in motion now. The journalist was vetting every name. Kathleen was protected. Rhett had done enough. Maybe for once that could be enough. He carved a small plank of pine and hung it above the entrance. "Ward 19, welcome home." No explanation. Just an open door. No paperwork. No shame. Just heat, walls, and a bed for whoever came next. He didn't expect many, but some would find it. Some always do. That night, Rhett sat on the porch steps with the wind cutting across his face, not as punishment but as reminder. He held the folded note Kathleen had given him. It wasn't long, just a name and a date. Her brother's, maybe, or hers. He didn't open it. He didn't have to. He held it like a flag, or a stone, or both, a symbol of what still mattered. A man can lose his rank, his records, his right to be believed, but not his promise. And in the hush between two breaths, Rhett made one. Not loud, not poetic, just real. He would stay, not just in the cabin, but in the world, present, accountable, available for whoever sat on these same steps after him, holding their own envelope, their own war. The cold didn't leave, but it no longer owned him. What would you have done if you came home and the door wasn't yours anymore, then found something that could either save your life or get you hunted? Drop your answer in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate Rhett's choice to tell the truth instead of taking the gold and disappearing? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter of this story. And tell me, where are you watching from today?